Okay, let's dive in. Imagine a scenario where the very definition of wrongdoing is blurry. High stakes, potential confusion.
Right, that feeling captures some of the tension in the legal case we're looking at today. It's not quite a whodunit, but it asks a fundamental question about legal clarity.
Exactly. We're unpacking a complex case from Hong Kong's highest court, the Court of Final Appeal, dating back to 2007. A listener sent us the materials.
And it all hinges on this really specific but crucial legal point,
Yeah, it was the definition of conspiracy to defraud in Hong Kong law. Clear enough. Clear enough to be considered prescribed by law.
which is a requirement under Hong Kong's Basic Law and its Bill of Rights ordinance.
So prescribed by law, think of it like, are the rules of the road clear? Can you tell if you're breaking the speed limit?
Precisely. It sounds technical, but it's about predictability, knowing what's legal and what's not. It has huge implications for, well, everyone's liberty.
So our mission today is to cut through the legal speak.
Yep. Understand the core issues, the arguments back and forth, and what the court decided.
And really explore that tension, between laws needing to be broad enough to catch bad actors.
And the need for those laws to be really clear so people aren't accidentally caught.
Okay, let's set the scene. Who is involved? The
Right.
appellant. We were calling her Zhang San, right? For
Yeah.
privacy.
Yes, Zhang San. And the charge was conspiracy to defraud a specific bank, China Bank, Hong Kong Limited.
Okay. And what was the alleged fraud about?
The claim was that between March and May 2003, Zhang San, along with others.
Others including someone called Lei Nu Shi and Zhang's husband, Zhu Zhengyi.
Exactly. Lei Nuxi was Zhang's personal assistant, and Zhu Zingyi, the husband, was the sole director of a company called Global Town Limited.
Got it.
And the allegation was they conspired to basically create a false impression about the trading activity and the share price of another company, Shanghai Land Holdings Limited.
Why would they do that? What was the goal?
It all tied back to a loan agreement. Zhu's company, Global Town, had borrowed a lot of money from China Bank to buy Shanghai Land Holdings.
Ah,
And the Shanghai Land shares themselves were pledged to the bank as security for that loan, collateral.
makes sense. So where does the share price manipulation come in?
There was a specific clause, a condition, in the loan agreement. Initially, it said the value of those pledged shares couldn't fall below the loan amount.
Okay.
But then it was changed. From March 31st, 2003, the rule was that 60% of the share's market value had to be at least equal to the outstanding loan.
So there was a critical share price level.
Yes. HK $0.58 per share became the magic number. If the price dropped below 58 cents,
Global Town would have to cough up more money.
exactly, they'd have to cover the shortfall to bring the collateral value back up.
So the alleged conspiracy was basically an attempt to artificially keep the share price at or above $0.58 to avoid that payment.
That was the prosecution's case, yes.
How did they supposedly do this? What actions were alleged?
Well, the prosecution pointed to a whole network of trading accounts, over 42 securities accounts,
42. Wow.
opened in the names of at least 12 different people. And a key point was the allegation that many of these people didn't even know their names were being used or hadn't consented.
Seriously. So front traders, essentially.
That's the term, yes. And the prosecution also alleged they got blank, pre-signed checkbooks from these individuals.
Okay, so who was actually doing the trading in these accounts?
The prosecution argued it was Lei Nuxi, Zhang San's assistant, acting on Zhang's instructions.
I see.
They were buying and selling Shanghai Land shares, often on margin.
Using borrowed money to trade, right? Leverage trading.
Correct. Amplifies gains and losses. And the funds were apparently coming from Zhang San or people connected to her.
And the timing was crucial, especially around that March 31st date.
Yes, the allegation was a concerted effort to prop up the price above HK Silver part of 58 cents, specifically around that repayment deadline.
What about the bank, China Bank? Were they aware of what was going on with the share price?
Well, they were definitely watching the price, especially at the close of trading each day.
Ah.
And interestingly, the evidence suggested that sometimes, even if the price dipped below HK $2.58 during the day, if it recovered by the closing bell.
They wouldn't demand the payment immediately.
Often, no. It seems they wouldn't press Global Town for the shortfall right away if the price ended at or above the threshold.
So the volume of trading from these alleged front accounts must have been significant.
Absolutely huge. The prosecution presented evidence showing that at times, the buying and selling from these accounts made up like 86% of all buy orders and 81% of all sell orders for Shanghai Land shares.
86%. That's basically controlling the market for that stock.
It paints a picture of activity being very heavily dominated, yes. But, this kind of artificial support rarely lasts forever.
Right. What happened?
The share price eventually crashed. This was in May 2003, after news broke that Zhu Zhengyi, the husband, had been arrested in Shanghai. On unrelated matters, it seems.
Okay, so the House of Cards collapsed. Now let's switch gears to the legal battle itself. The Court of Appeal certified a specific question of law, didn't they?
They did. It's the core legal issue we mentioned earlier. Was the way the crime of conspiracy to defraud was formulated, was it clear enough?
Clear enough to meet that standard of being prescribed by law under the Basic Law and just by law under the Bill of Rights Ordinance.
Exactly. It's about legal certainty. Can someone reasonably foresee whether their actions might fall foul of this law?
Like, are the boundaries clearly marked?
Precisely. If the rules are fuzzy, how can you play the game fairly or know if you're breaking them?
So what was the defense, Zhang San's team, arguing? Why did they think it wasn't clear enough?
Their main argument was that the definition was just too broad, too uncertain. They really zoomed in on the element of dishonesty.
Ah, the dishonesty part. What was their issue with that?
They argued it was too subjective, like what one person considers dishonest, another might not. And they also pointed out the offense didn't require a specific type of deception.
So the worry was it could catch conduct that wasn't really meant to be criminal?
That was the thrust of it, yeah, that it was potentially over-criminalizing actions.
Were they just pulling this out of thin air, or did they have support for this view?
Oh, no. They drew on quite a bit of legal critique, reports from the Law Reform Commission in places like Hong Kong and the UK.
Right. Bodies that review laws.
Exactly. And academic writings, too. These sources had already flagged concerns about how broad conspiracy to defraud was, how hard it is to pin down precisely.
What kinds of concerns?
Things like it could potentially criminalize an agreement to do something that wouldn't even be illegal if just one person did it.
Oh, interesting.
And the possibility of punishment, even without clear, outright lies or deception, just acting dishonestly.
And this term dishonesty itself was really under the microscope.
Absolutely. They questioned its definition, whether it could cover things beyond purely financial loss, like reputational damage or something.
Or even just breaking a private agreement.
They raised that, too. Could it apply to breaches of, say, contractual duties? Their core point was this principle of legal certainty. Laws need to be predictable.
So you can plan your life, your business, without fear of falling into a legal trap you didn't see.
Right. They worried about a chilling effect, that businesses might avoid perfectly legitimate activities just because they were scared of accidentally crossing some vague line defined by dishonesty.
Did they also mention other, more specific laws?
Yes, that was another key point. They highlighted that things like market manipulation were already covered by specific statutes, like the Securities Ordinance.
Which is designed specifically for the stock market.
Correct. So they questioned why prosecutors would use this broad common law charge of conspiracy to defraud, which often carries heavier penalties.
When there's a specific law already on the books.
Exactly. Especially since common law offenses evolve through court decisions, not written statutes, which can sometimes make their exact scope feel less fixed.
Okay, a lot of strong arguments there about clarity and breadth. So what did the Court of Final Appeal decide? Did they agree the law was too fuzzy?
No, ultimately they didn't. They sided with the Court of Appeal's earlier judgment and upheld Zhang San's conviction.
So they found the definition was clear enough.
They concluded it met the constitutional requirement of being prescribed by law.
How did they justify that? How did they tackle those concerns about dishonesty being too vague?
They confirmed that dishonesty is absolutely central to the offense, and they specifically approved the tests used to assess it, the two-stage test from an English case, R.V. Ghosh.
The Ghosh test. Can you remind us what that involves?
Sure. It has two parts. First, you ask, would ordinary decent people consider the defendant's actions to be dishonest? That's the objective part.
Okay, judged by community standards.
Right. Then, the second part is subjective. Did the defendant realize that ordinary honest people would see their actions as dishonest?
So it's not enough just to be dishonest by objective standards. You also have to realize that's how others would view it.
According to the Ghosh test, yes. And the court felt this two-part test provided a workable and sufficiently clear standard.
Even though dishonesty itself isn't defined in a statute.
Yes. They said, look, We haven't seen major problems applying this test in Hong Kong courts. It's been used in many previous cases.
So the argument that it was too uncertain didn't persuade them.
No. They essentially said that while applying the test requires looking closely at the facts of each case, the standard itself isn't fatally uncertain.
What about the other points, like extending the crime to non-economic loss or breaches of private duties?
On non-economic loss, the court kind of kicked the can down the road. They acknowledged past cases suggested it might apply. But since this case clearly involved potential economic loss to the bank, they said they didn't need to make a final decision on that broader question right now.
Okay. And breaches of private responsibility, like contracts?
They rejected that more firmly. They thought bringing breaches of private duties, like contract terms, under the umbrella of criminal conspiracy to defraud would stretch the criminal law too far into areas better left to civil law.
That makes sense. What about the overbreadth argument, the idea the law was just too wide-ranging?
The court made a careful distinction there. They said there's a difference between a law being broad and a law being vague.
Ah, okay. So broad isn't automatically bad.
Not necessarily unconstitutional, no. They admitted conspiracy to defraud is a broad offense, covering many situations. But they argued it wasn't so poorly defined that people couldn't figure out what was prohibited.
So broad, maybe, but not vague enough to be unlawful.
That was their finding. They also pushed back against using a proportionality test for legal certainty, saying that test is for justifying limits on rights, not for defining if a law is clear enough in the first place.
And finally, the overlap issue. The fact that specific laws like market manipulation existed.
They acknowledged the overlap, but they stated that the existence of a specific statutory offense doesn't automatically prevent prosecutors from using the broader common law charge.
So prosecutors still have a choice.
Yes, especially, the court suggested, if the conduct is particularly serious and might warrant the potentially higher penalties available under the common law charge.
But did they offer any guidance on that choice?
They did add a sort of best practice note. They suggested prosecutors should generally use the specific statutory offenses.
Unless
There are good reasons to opt for the common law conspiracy charge instead. So discretion, but with a nudge towards the specific statutes where appropriate.
Okay, so after that whole deep dive, what's the big takeaway message from this case?
I think the key point is the court affirmed that conspiracy to defraud, despite its breadth, is considered sufficiently clearly defined in Hong Kong law. The gauche test for dishonesty is central to that clarity.
And the overlap with other laws doesn't kill the common law offense, but prosecutors should think carefully about which charge to bring.
Exactly. Prosecutorial discretion remains important.
Now, why should someone listening, maybe not in Hong Kong, maybe not a lawyer, care about this specific legal tussle?
Because it really highlights a universal challenge in law, doesn't it? It's this constant balancing act.
Between what?
Between needing laws that are flexible enough to catch new kinds of complex wrongdoing, especially in finance or online.
Right. Things evolve quickly.
And the fundamental right for individuals to know clearly and predictably what the law actually forbids. You need that certainty.
So this debate about defining dishonesty, about how broad conspiracy charges should be, it's not just a Hong Kong issue.
Not at all. It's a live debate in legal systems everywhere.
Yeah.
How do you ensure justice without creating laws so vague that people are scared to act?
That really crystallizes it. So, building on that, what's a final provocative thought for us to chew on?
Well, thinking about our modern world, super complex finance, constant online interaction, how do we best strike that balance going forward? Do we need more adaptable, broad tools like conspiracy to defraud, even if they feel a bit fuzzy around the edges? Or is the answer more specific, detailed legislation?
Could more specific laws give us that clarity without letting serious misconduct slip through the cracks?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And maybe also, what's our own responsibility as citizens to understand these broad legal ideas like dishonesty that shape the rules we live by?
Those are really big, important questions. And if this deep dive has got you thinking, and we hope it has, remember, we've only scratched the surface.
Yeah, the full judgment is packed with detailed reasoning.
Absolutely. So we encourage you, if you're interested, dig deeper into these ideas about legal certainty, the pros and cons of broad laws. Keep an eye on how this area develops.
And let us know what you think. What part of this case or the whole idea of legal certainty struck you the most? Was it compelling? Concerning?
Yeah, share your thoughts. Your questions might just spark our next deep dive.